Hey, welcome to Phrase by Phrase, where we are studying the Word of God one phrase at a time. And today we're in a study, the book of James, and today we're on James chapter 4, beginning that chapter. We're going to look at verse 1 today. So let's dive right in. This is what it said, and this is kind of a tough topic, but James says in verse 1, "What is the source of quarrels and conflicts among you?" So evidently, when he was writing these people, there were conflicts in the church, which isn't surprising because there always are when people are together. If you put people together and resources together, you're going to have conflicts. However, there's a big difference between a conflict, which is part of every human relationship, and the type of thing that James is speaking about here. He uses two words to describe their situation. He uses the word quarrels, which is a word that actually means war. So what is the source of war among you? It's in the present tense. So it's an ongoing situation. So it's more like a feud, a protracted state of hostility. Why is this state of fighting and feuding going on? And then the word conflicts itself is a word that refers to specific outbursts of hostility, fights that erupt as part of the ongoing conflict. And both words are plural, so it's a chronic condition as opposed maybe to an isolated event, just a momentary flare-up and it's kind of done, but it just keeps happening and happening and happening. A paraphrase might be this: so where does the prolonged state of warfare come from, and where do those individual battles that fill up that prolonged state come from? And so the kind of feuding that James is talking about really does damage to the witness of the church. A 17th century Jewish philosopher named Spinoza wryly observed, he said, "I have often wondered that persons who make boast of professing the Christian religion, namely love, joy, peace, temperance, and charity to all men, should quarrel with such rancorous animosity and display daily towards one another such bitter hatred, that this, rather than the virtues which they profess, is the readiest criteria of their faith." In other words, you look at them and they're talking about love, joy, and peace, and the thing you notice most about them is that they're always warring and fighting. And so when the protracted conflict continues, the first thing we have to do in the church is really get to the root of the problem. What's really going on, which is what James drives at, because he says here, "Is not the source your pleasures that wage war in your members?" Now, the word pleasures identifies the motivation that's driving the conflict, and that seems odd to say it's pleasure, because I don't know if anybody ever really takes pleasure when there's fighting going on. But it makes sense to say that the driving motivation is selfishness. Maybe it's selfishness that's driving it, but pleasure just seems like a strange word. But the reason James identifies that issue is because pleasure is the motivation behind selfishness. The Greek word that uses the word hedon, which we get our word hedonism from. And so it means a devotion to self-indulgence. In other words, I want my way, I want what I want want it when I want it. And so that's really what's behind it. It's the opposite idea of sacrifice. So this is a drive that's opposite of sacrificially laying your life down for another. It's a longing for total and immediate satisfaction. So instead of following the dictates of Christ, which would say do nothing from selfish ambition or empty conceit, but consider the needs of one another as more important than your own, that's how Christ is saying we should live. James is saying you guys are living just the opposite of that. This is all about what's in it for you. And then when he talks about this, he talks about them waging war, which is this picture of soldiers marching in a military campaign aiming at securing the satisfaction of their cravings. And again, it's present tense, so it's ongoing, it's relentless. And so he's saying, why is all of that happening among you? And that's really a great question, and it just demonstrates that worldliness has gripped the heart of someone who is involved constantly in conflict and battles and pushing those things for their own agenda and their own purposes. And so James is going to speak to this, and it will be good for us to listen to it. And I know that as you listen to something like this, you immediately can think of somebody that you know that you'd say, that sounds like them. But maybe what we need to do is say, Lord, is there something here I can learn for me? And so you think about that. I'll see you next time as we study the Bible, phrase by phrase.